The air thrummed with the rhythmic chop of helicopter blades, a sound that sliced through the saccharine melodies of the wedding band. Below, the manicured lawns of Sterling Manor, usually a picture of serene affluence, were a chaotic tableau of white and champagne. Richard Sterling, his jaw set and eyes locked on the horizon, stood beside his bride, Tiffany, under a floral arch that seemed to mock the grandeur of the moment. The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows, mirroring the unease that had begun to ripple through the assembled guests. Tiffany, her porcelain face marred by a thin line of apprehension, tightened her grip on Richard's arm. Her carefully curated smile faltered. "Richard, what is that sound?" He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the sleek, black helicopter descending like a predatory bird, kicking up a whirlwind of rose petals and scattering the elegantly dressed crowd. The air crackled with a tension that was thick and suffocating. From the heart of the swirling dust and petals, a figure emerged. Emily Carter. She descended from the helicopter, her posture radiating a glacial poise that belied the storm raging within her. She was a vision of reclaimed power, a phoenix risen from the ashes. Her tailored crimson dress, a stark contrast to the bridal white and pastel hues surrounding her, moved with a liquid grace that demanded attention. The two children at her side, a boy and a girl, identical in their blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, held her hands with a quiet confidence that belied their tender age. Twins. Richard's twins. The collective gasp from the crowd was a wave of sound that washed over the manicured lawns. Whispers, like venomous snakes, slithered through the throng, each syllable laced with shock and morbid curiosity. Emily's gaze, sharp and unwavering, locked onto Richard's. It was a look that held not a trace of the woman he had discarded 6 years prior. The vulnerability he had so cruelly exploited had been replaced by a resolve forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by the steel of self-reliance. She moved with a deliberate slowness, each step a declaration of her resurgence. The twins, their expressions mirroring their mother's composure, walked beside her like loyal sentinels. The helicopter, its rotors still spinning, acted as a dramatic backdrop to her entrance, framing her in a halo of defiance. Tiffany, her face now a mask of incredulous rage, took a step forward. "Emily. What are you doing here?" Emily's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Attending a wedding." Her voice, though soft, carried across the stunned silence like a clarion call. "A very significant wedding." Richard, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, guilt, and a dawning realization of the situation's gravity, found his voice. "Emily, this is inappropriate. You can't just show up here like this." "Inappropriate?" Emily echoed, her smile fading. "Inappropriate is a rather mild term for what you did, Richard. 6 years ago. But then, you've always had a talent for understatement." The twins, their eyes fixed on their father, remained silent, their presence a tangible manifestation of Richard's betrayal and Emily's resilience. They were the living, breathing testament to the life he had so callously discarded. The tension in the air thickened, each unspoken word hanging heavy like a storm cloud about to burst. The carefully orchestrated facade of the wedding, the illusion of happiness and celebration, was shattered. The ghosts of the past, long buried, had risen, demanding their due. The ballroom of Sterling Manor shimmered, a spectacle of cascading crystal chandeliers and the hushed symphony of clinking champagne flutes. It was a tableau vivant of the American elite, a gathering where the scent of rare orchids mingled with the perfume of wealth. Tonight, it was a celebration, a testament to the gilded union of Richard Sterling and Emily Carter, a couple who seemed to have captured the very essence of the American dream. Richard, tall and impeccably tailored, moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to command. His smile, broad and genuine, radiated the charm that had propelled him to the heights of the business world. Beside him, Emily was a vision of timeless elegance, her laughter a melodic counterpoint to the evening's refined ambience. Tonight, She wore a gown of shimmering emerald silk, the color chosen to accentuate the vivid green of her eyes, a shade that seemed to sparkle with the joy that filled the room. They were a power couple, a beacon of success, their lives a carefully curated masterpiece. Stirling Manor, their ancestral estate, was a reflection of their status, sprawling lawns, manicured gardens, and an interior that spoke of centuries of wealth and refinement. Tonight, it was a stage set for their happiness, a backdrop for the narrative they presented to the world. The party swirled around them, a constellation of influential figures from the worlds of business, politics, and society. There were whispered conversations of mergers and acquisitions, the clinking of delicate glassware, and the soft strains of a live orchestra playing tunes that whispered of romance and celebration. Among the guests, Jason Miller, Richard's childhood friend and now a trusted advisor, moved with an almost serpentine grace. His smile was ever present, his eyes sharp and observant, cataloging the nuances of power and influence in the room. Beside him, Tiffany, his sister, a woman with a glacial beauty and an air of calculated charm, mirrored his watchful demeanor. Together, they formed a striking pair, their presence a subtle undercurrent in the evening's otherwise harmonious flow. Richard raised his glass, his voice cutting through the ambient hum of the party. To Emily, he proclaimed, his eyes locking onto hers with a warmth that seemed genuine. To the woman who makes every day a celebration. The crowd responded with a chorus of toasts, their voices a testament to the admiration and envy that Richard and Emily inspired. Emily's cheeks flushed with a becoming blush, and she raised her own glass, her smile radiant. To Richard, she responded, her voice tinged with affection. To the man who makes dreams a reality. The moment was perfect, a snapshot of happiness, a testament to the illusion of perfection they had so carefully constructed. But beneath the surface, beneath the polished veneer of their perfect lives, cracks had begun to form, hairline fractures in the foundation of their seemingly unbreakable bond. Emily, despite the joy she projected, felt a subtle unease, a nagging sense that something was amiss. Small things, almost imperceptible, had begun to disturb the equilibrium of their lives. A lingering glance from Tiffany that felt too intense, a hushed conversation between Richard and Jason that abruptly ended when she approached, a sense of distance that had begun to grow between herself and the man she loved. She dismissed these feelings, attributing them to the pressures of their demanding lives, the constant scrutiny that came with their position. But the unease persisted, a faint tremor in the otherwise smooth surface of her happiness. Jason and Tiffany's presence had become more pronounced, their influence subtly weaving its way into the fabric of Richard's life. They were always there, offering advice, suggesting solutions, becoming indispensable. Their loyalty to Richard seemed absolute, their devotion unwavering. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that their motives ran deeper, that their presence was more about control than camaraderie. The party continued, the music swelling, the laughter echoing through the grand halls of Stirling Manor. But for Emily, the evening had lost its luster. The weight of her unspoken suspicions, the subtle yet growing unease, cast a shadow over the otherwise perfect scene. As the night wore on, Richard, caught up in the whirl of congratulations and business opportunities, drifted away from her side. Emily found herself increasingly alone, her smile becoming strained, her eyes searching the crowd for a sense of reassurance, a sign that her unease was unfounded. She watched Richard as he engaged in animated conversation with Jason, their heads close together, their voices hushed. She tried to catch his eye, to draw him back into their shared world, but he remained oblivious, his attention fully consumed by Jason's words. Tiffany, sensing Emily's isolation, approached her, her smile cool and composed. "Everything all right, Emily?" she asked, her voice laced with a subtle hint of condescension. Emily forced a smile. "Perfectly fine, Tiffany," she replied, her voice steady. "Just enjoying the festivities." Tiffany's smile didn't waver. "Of course," she said, her eyes glinting with a knowing look. It's a wonderful celebration. Richard has always had a flair for the dramatic, hasn't he? Emily's unease deepened. There was something in Tiffany's tone, a subtle undercurrent of malice that sent a shiver down her spine. He does, she agreed, her voice tight. He always knows how to create a spectacle. As the night drew to a close, and the guests began to depart, Emily found herself increasingly isolated. Richard, still engrossed in his conversations, seemed oblivious to her growing discomfort. She watched as he and Jason shared a private laugh, a camaraderie that excluded her, a bond that seemed to have deepened in ways she couldn't comprehend. The opulence of the party, the grandeur of Sterling Manor, the carefully constructed illusion of their perfect lives, all seemed to fade away, leaving behind a sense of emptiness, a void that mirrored the growing distance between herself and the man she loved. The gilding had begun to crack, the flawless facade revealing the fractures beneath, the shadows that lurked in the corners of their seemingly perfect world. The opulence of the Sterling Manor ballroom served as a deceptive backdrop, an illusion designed to conceal the subtle currents of deceit and calculated manipulation that swirled just beneath the surface. Jason and Tiffany Miller, a duo that exuded an air of effortless charm and unwavering loyalty, were the architects of this deceptive facade. Their smiles, though warm and inviting, held a chilling undercurrent, a silent promise of ulterior motives. Their laughter, light and melodic, masked the calculated nature of their every interaction. Jason, with his lean frame and disarming smile, moved through the crowd like a seasoned predator, his eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing, calculating, and manipulating. His charm was his weapon, a tool he wielded with practiced precision, charming his way into the confidence of those who held power and influence. His words, always carefully chosen, were designed to ingratiate, to subtly weave his agenda into the fabric of their conversations. Tiffany, his sister, was a study in calculated elegance. Her beauty was undeniable, a sharp, icy beauty that held a strange allure. Her eyes, cool and assessing, missed nothing, cataloging every detail of the room, every nuance of the interactions around her. Her smile, though frequent, never quite reached her eyes, a subtle indicator of the cold calculation that lay beneath her polished exterior. Together, they were a formidable team, their bond forged in shared ambition and a hunger for power. They moved as one, their actions coordinated, their words carefully aligned. Their loyalty to Richard was a performance, a carefully crafted role they played to gain his trust, to insinuate themselves into his life, and ultimately, to seize control. Their interactions with Richard were a masterpiece of manipulation. They were always there, ready with a compliment, a suggestion, or a solution. They were his confidants, his advisors, his most trusted allies. They listened with rapt attention, their expressions mirroring his own, their responses tailored to his desires. They anticipated his needs, preempted his concerns, and subtly steered him towards their own agenda. Their influence extended beyond Richard's professional life. They were fixtures at Sterling Manor, attending every social gathering, every family event, their presence a constant reminder of their unwavering devotion. They were the perfect friends, the ideal companions, the indispensable allies. But their smiles never quite reached their eyes. Their laughter held a hint of mockery. Their words, though seemingly supportive, carried a subtle undercurrent of control. They were always watching, always listening, always calculating. Emily, despite her efforts to dismiss her growing unease, couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The way Jason's eyes lingered on Richard, a possessive glint that spoke of ownership rather than friendship. The way Tiffany's smile seemed to mock her, a silent declaration of superiority. The way their voices dropped to hushed tones whenever she approached, a clear attempt to exclude her. She noticed the subtle shifts in Richard's behavior, the way he deferred to Jason's opinions, the way he seemed to seek Tiffany's approval. The way their influence had subtly permeated every aspect of his life, from his business decisions to his social interactions. The opulence of their surroundings, the extravagance of the party, all seemed to magnify the sense of unease that had settled in her heart. She felt like an outsider in her own home, a spectator in her own life. The night wore on, the laughter and music fading into a dull hum, the air thick with unspoken tension. Emily watched as Richard and Jason engaged in a hushed conversation, their heads close together, their expressions serious. She tried to catch Richard's eye, to break the spell that seemed to bind him to Jason, but he remained oblivious, his attention fully consumed. Tiffany approached her, her smile cool and composed. "You seem lost in thought, Emily," she said, her voice laced with a subtle hint of mockery. "Just admiring the ambience," Emily replied, her voice steady. "It's quite a spectacle." "Indeed," Tiffany agreed, her eyes glinting with amusement. "Richard always knows how to create an impression." The implication hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the power dynamic that had subtly shifted. Tiffany and Jason were no longer mere friends, they were architects of Richard's world, puppet masters pulling the strings, orchestrating the narrative of his life. Emily's unease deepened. She knew she had to act, to unravel the carefully constructed web of deceit that Jason and Tiffany had woven around Richard. But she also knew that they were formidable adversaries, their smiles hiding a ruthless determination, their words masking a cunning intelligence. The night was a masquerade, a performance designed to conceal the true nature of their relationships. The smiles, the laughter, the declarations of loyalty were all carefully crafted illusions, masks worn to deceive, to manipulate, to control. And Emily, trapped in this elaborate charade, knew that the game had only just begun. The echoes of the lavish party still lingered in the grand halls of Stirling Manor, but the atmosphere had shifted, the festive air replaced by a heavy silence that hung like a shroud. Emily, unable to shake off the sense of unease that had settled over her, retreated to the sanctuary of her study, seeking solace in the familiar comfort of her books and papers. She tried to focus, to lose herself in the words on the page, but her thoughts kept returning to the unsettling interactions of the evening, the subtle shifts in Richard's behavior, the carefully orchestrated performances of Jason and Tiffany. The feeling of being watched, of being manipulated, had become unbearable. Driven by a restless energy, she began to sort through the clutter on her desk, searching for a distraction, a way to quell the growing anxiety that gnawed at her. Her fingers brushed against a stack of files, the top one labeled confidential. Curiosity piqued, she opened the folder, expecting to find routine business documents, but what she found sent a jolt of ice through her veins. The files contained a series of photographs and documents, meticulously arranged to portray a narrative of infidelity. There were grainy images of Emily in intimate settings with a man she barely recognized, emails filled with fabricated conversations, and bank statements showing suspicious transactions. Each piece of evidence, though expertly crafted, was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion designed to destroy her reputation and her marriage. The shock was immediate, a physical blow that left her reeling. The world around her seemed to tilt and distort, the familiar comfort of her study transforming into a stage set for betrayal. She stared at the fabricated evidence, her mind struggling to process the implications, to comprehend the depth of the deception. A cold fury began to simmer within her, a slow-burning rage that threatened to consume her. She knew, with chilling certainty, that Jason and Tiffany were behind this. Their calculated smiles, their unwavering loyalty, their constant presence in Richard's life, it all made sense now. They were the architects of this elaborate deception, the puppet masters pulling the strings, orchestrating her downfall. The realization was a turning point, a moment of stark clarity that shattered the illusions of her perfect world. She was no longer a passive observer in her own life, but a warrior facing an enemy that had infiltrated her inner circle, wielding the weapons of deceit and betrayal. She knew she had to act, to expose their lies and reclaim her life. But she also knew that they were cunning adversaries, their influence reaching deep into Richard's trust and affections. She needed a plan, a strategy to dismantle their carefully constructed web of deceit. As she delved deeper into the fabricated evidence, she discovered the meticulous detail of their plot. They had anticipated her every move, anticipating her reactions and counteracting her defenses. They had even managed to manipulate Richard's trust, turning him against her, isolating her from his support. The evidence was damning, a testament to the extent of their treachery. They had not only fabricated evidence of infidelity, but they had also orchestrated a series of business transactions designed to undermine her financial security, to leave her destitute and dependent. The realization of their true intentions sent a wave of nausea through her. They were not merely seeking to control Richard, they were seeking to destroy her, to erase her from his life, to seize control of their shared empire. But Emily was not one to be easily defeated. The initial shock gave way to a steely resolve, a determination to fight back against the injustice that had been inflicted upon her. She would not allow them to steal her life, to dismantle her legacy. She began to meticulously document their every move, collecting evidence of their manipulations, uncovering the threads of their elaborate plot. She would expose their lies, dismantle their illusions, and reclaim her rightful place in the world they sought to steal from her. The discovery of the fabricated evidence was a turning point, a catalyst that transformed her from a victim into a warrior. The gilded world they had constructed around her had crumbled, revealing the dark undercurrents of deceit and betrayal. But from the ashes of her shattered illusions, a new Emily would emerge, stronger, more determined, and ready to fight for her survival. The grand facade of Stirling Manor, once a symbol of their perfect union, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping Emily within its opulent walls. The fabricated evidence, the meticulously crafted lies, had not only destroyed her reputation but also shattered the bedrock of her trust in Richard. The man she had loved, the man she had believed in, had seemingly turned against her, blinded by the venomous whispers of Jason and Tiffany. The emotional devastation was profound, a chasm that opened within her soul, threatening to swallow her whole. The memories of their shared life, once a source of joy and comfort, now morphed into painful reminders of what she had lost. The laughter, the whispered secrets, the dreams they had built together, all of it tainted by the knowledge of Richard's betrayal. Sleep offered no respite, only a relentless replay of the events of the evening, each scene magnified, each word sharpened into a weapon against her heart. She tossed and turned, the silken sheets feeling like icy restraints, the darkness of her bedroom mirroring the emptiness within her. The morning light, which once filled her with hope and energy, now seemed to mock her sorrow, casting long, distorted shadows across the room, mirroring the disarray of her emotions. She rose, her body heavy, her spirit broken, and moved through the silent halls of Stirling Manor, a ghost haunting the remnants of her former life. The sight of Richard's study, where they had once spent hours discussing their dreams and plans, now filled her with a sense of dread. The desk, cluttered with his papers and notes, felt like a silent accuser, a reminder of the secrets he had kept, the lies he had allowed to fester. She wandered into the grand ballroom, the scene of their triumphant celebration, now a desolate space, its echoes mocking the emptiness of her present. The crystal chandeliers, once sparkling symbols of their success, now seemed to weep tears of broken trust, their light reflecting the fragments of her shattered heart. The memories of their wedding day flooded her mind, the promises they had made, the vows they had exchanged, now twisted into cruel parodies of their former selves. The image of Richard, his eyes filled with love, his voice ringing with sincerity, now seemed like a grotesque mockery, a carefully crafted performance designed to deceive. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on her, an unbearable burden that threatened to crush her spirit. She felt like a marionette, her strings cut, her movements clumsy and directionless. The world around her had lost its color, its vibrancy, replaced by a dull grayness that mirrored the emptiness within her. She retreated to her private garden, seeking solace in the beauty of nature, but even the vibrant bloom seemed to wither in her presence, their sweet scent replaced by the bitter tang of betrayal. The whispering leaves, once a source of comfort, now seemed to murmur accusations, echoing the doubts that gnawed at her soul. The tears finally came, a torrent of grief that washed over her, cleansing the pain, but leaving behind a raw, aching wound. She wept for the loss of her love, for the betrayal of her trust, for the shattering of her dreams. Amidst the devastation, a flicker of resolve began to emerge. She would not allow them to steal her life, to dismantle her spirit. She would rise from the ashes of her shattered illusions, stronger and more determined than ever. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and betrayal. But she would not falter. She would unravel their lies, expose their treachery, and reclaim her life. The pain of Richard's betrayal would fuel her determination, the grief of her shattered dreams would forge her strength. She would transform her pain into a weapon, her grief into a shield. And she would emerge from this crucible of betrayal, not as a victim, but as a warrior, ready to fight for her survival. The imposing gates of Stirling Manor slammed shut, the resounding echo a cruel punctuation mark on Emily's expulsion. The manicured lawns, once a symbol of her idyllic life, now stretched out before her, cold and indifferent. The limousine, which had whisked her away from the opulent celebration only hours before, deposited her on the desolate roadside, its tail lights disappearing into the inky blackness like mocking embers. The abruptness of her downfall was staggering. One moment, she was the queen of her domain, the other, a castaway stripped of her dignity, her possessions, and her identity. The sheer injustice of it was a bitter pill she struggled to swallow. Richard's words, cold and dismissive, echoed in her ears, a chilling counterpoint to the vows they had once exchanged. "You have betrayed me," he had accused, his eyes filled with a chilling coldness that was utterly foreign. The wind whipped around her, a biting gust that seemed to mock her fragile state. She stood there, a solitary figure against the vast expanse of the night, the silence broken only by the rustling of the leaves and the distant hum of traffic. The sheer isolation was a crushing weight, a stark reminder of the void that had opened in her life. The world she had inhabited, the life she had built, had vanished in an instant, leaving behind a barren landscape of betrayal and despair. The opulence of Stirling Manor, the warmth of Richard's embrace, the camaraderie of their shared life, all of it had morphed into a cruel illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had crumbled, revealing the ugliness beneath. With no destination in mind, she began to walk, her footsteps echoing on the deserted road. Each step was a testament to her isolation, a desperate attempt to put distance between herself and the ghosts of her shattered life. The weight of her betrayal, the sting of Richard's rejection, was a heavy burden, pressing down on her with an unbearable force. The night deepened, the darkness a tangible entity that enveloped her, mirroring the emptiness within her soul. The familiar landmarks, the stately homes and manicured gardens that had once been the backdrop of her life, now loomed like silent sentinels, their opulence a cruel reminder of her loss. She found herself gravitating towards the city's outskirts, the neon glow of its late-night establishments a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed her. The garish lights and raucous sounds, once repulsive, now offered a perverse comfort, a distraction from the deafening silence of her despair. She sought refuge in a dingy motel, its faded sign a stark contrast to the grandeur of Stirling Manor. The grimy room, with its stained carpet and peeling wallpaper, was a far cry from the luxurious bedroom she had once shared with Richard. Yet, in its stark simplicity, it offered a temporary sanctuary, a place to lick her wounds and gather her strength. The nights that followed were a blur of sleepless hours and tear-soaked pillows. The weight of her betrayal, the knowledge that Richard had turned against her, was a constant torment. She replayed their conversations, searching for clues, for hints of the deception that had been unfolding around her, but found only a blank wall of incomprehension. The pain was a living entity, gnawing at her insides, threatening to consume her whole. She felt like a phantom, a ghost haunting the fringes of her former life. The familiar routines, the shared meals, the whispered confidences, all of it had been ripped away, leaving a void that echoed with the silence of her despair. The days stretched out like an eternity, each hour a cruel reminder of her isolation. She wandered the streets, a solitary figure amidst the throngs of people, her eyes searching for a familiar face, a friendly smile, but finding only indifference. She was an island, adrift in a sea of strangers, her loneliness a tangible entity that pressed down on her with suffocating force. The knowledge that Jason and Tiffany had orchestrated her downfall, that they had woven a web of lies and deceit to destroy her life, fueled a burning anger within her. She vowed to expose their treachery, to reclaim her life, to make them pay for their cruelty. But the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, the odds stacked against her. She was alone, stripped of her resources, her reputation tarnished, her heart broken. Yet, amidst the devastation, a flicker of defiance began to emerge. She would not allow them to break her spirit. She would rise from the ashes of her shattered life, stronger and more determined than ever. She would transform her pain into a weapon, her grief into a shield. And she would emerge from this crucible of betrayal, not as a victim, but as a warrior, ready to fight for her survival. Emily's solitude deepened as the days bled into one another, each moment a painful reminder of her fractured reality. She moved through the city like a wraith, a shadow of her former self, the opulence of her past life replaced by the stark reality of her present circumstances. The dingy motel room, with its stale air and peeling wallpaper, was her only refuge, a temporary sanctuary from the harshness of her new existence. The city, once a vibrant tapestry of life, now felt like a cold, indifferent maze. The throngs of people, their faces etched with indifference, amplified her isolation, each encounter a stark reminder of her solitude. She was an island, adrift in a sea of strangers, her loneliness a tangible entity that pressed down on her with suffocating force. One evening, as the city's neon lights began to cast their garish glow, Emily found herself wandering through a dimly lit alleyway, her footsteps echoing on the damp pavement. The weight of her despair, the gnawing emptiness within her, had become almost unbearable. She felt like a hollow shell, a mere echo of the woman she once was. A sudden gust of wind sent a shiver through her, and she wrapped her arms around herself, seeking a semblance of warmth. As she stumbled along, her gaze fell upon a small, unassuming diner, its warm glow emanating from its windows like a beacon in the darkness. Hesitantly, she pushed open the door, the bell above chiming a soft melody that seemed to cut through the silence of her despair. The diner was a haven of warmth and light, its cozy booths filled with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of cutlery. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, a stark contrast to the stale scent of her motel room. Behind the counter, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile greeted her. Her name was Eleanor, and her presence was like a soothing balm to Emily's wounded spirit. There was an aura of quiet strength about her, a sense of calm that emanated from her like a gentle warmth. "You look like you could use a warm meal," Eleanor said, her voice soft and reassuring. "Come, sit." Emily, her voice hoarse from disuse, managed a weak smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her gratitude a fragile offering. As she sat in the cozy booth, the warmth of the diner seeping into her chilled bones, Eleanor brought her a steaming mug of coffee and a plate piled high with comfort food. The simple act of kindness, the warmth of the food, the gentle concern in Eleanor's eyes, brought a lump to Emily's throat. For the first time since her expulsion from Sterling Manor, Emily felt a flicker of hope, a spark of warmth amidst the darkness that had consumed her. Eleanor's presence was a lifeline, a beacon of light in her desolate world. Over the next few days, Emily found herself drawn to the diner, seeking the warmth of Eleanor's presence, the comfort of her kindness. Eleanor listened with unwavering attention, her eyes filled with empathy, as Emily recounted the tale of her betrayal, the shattering of her trust, the emptiness of her present existence. Eleanor offered no judgment, No platitudes, only a quiet understanding and a gentle encouragement. "You are stronger than you think," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "You will rise from this, stronger and wiser." Her words were a balm to Emily's wounded spirit, a reminder of the strength that lay dormant within her. Eleanor's kindness, her unwavering belief in Emily's resilience, became a lifeline, a source of hope in the darkness of her despair. Eleanor also began helping Emily navigate the practicalities of her situation, finding her more appropriate accommodation, and helping her establish a few lines of credit, based on nothing but Eleanor's inherent belief in Emily. Eleanor was an anchor, keeping Emily from the crushing waves of hopelessness. In Eleanor's presence, the pain of Richard's betrayal, the anger at Jason and Tiffany's treachery, began to morph into a steely determination. She would not allow them to break her spirit. She would rise from the ashes of her shattered life, stronger and more determined than ever. Eleanor's kindness, her unwavering belief in Emily's resilience, became a catalyst, a spark that ignited the dormant fire within her. She would transform her pain into a weapon, her grief into a shield. And she would emerge from this crucible of betrayal, not as a victim, but as a warrior, ready to fight for her survival. The cozy confines of Eleanor's diner became Emily's sanctuary, a haven where she could piece together the fragments of her shattered life. Eleanor's unwavering support and the diner's comforting atmosphere provided a stark contrast to the opulent but deceitful world she had been thrust from. Yet, even within the sanctuary, Emily understood that she couldn't remain stagnant. She had to rebuild, not just her life, but herself. The first step was to establish a foundation, to secure basic necessities. Eleanor, with her pragmatic wisdom, guided Emily through the maze of bureaucratic paperwork and legal hurdles, helping her obtain a new identity and establish a modest bank account, using the few remaining assets Emily had managed to secure. The stark contrast between her former life of luxury and her current existence was jarring. Emily, who had once commanded a staff of dozens, now found herself scrubbing floors and waiting tables in Eleanor's diner, her hands calloused, her back aching. But she approached each task with a quiet dignity, refusing to let her circumstances diminish her spirit. The work was grueling, the hours long, and the pay meager. Yet, Emily found a strange sense of liberation in the simplicity of her tasks. There was a raw honesty in the labor, a tangible connection to the world that had been obscured by the artificiality of her former life. During her rare moments of respite, Emily immersed herself in the pursuit of knowledge. She devoured books on business, law, and finance, determined to understand the intricacies of the world she had once inhabited. She dissected the strategies of her former business rivals, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses, searching for the chinks in their armor. She also learned to navigate the digital world, a realm that had been largely foreign to her in her previous life. She mastered the art of coding, of data analysis, of online marketing, skills that would prove invaluable in her quest for self-sufficiency. Eleanor, recognizing Emily's innate intelligence and determination, became her mentor and confidant. She shared her own experiences of overcoming adversity, her stories of resilience and triumph serving as a beacon of hope in Emily's darkest hours. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's physical transformation was mirrored by an inner evolution. The fragility that had marked her initial arrival at the diner was replaced by a quiet strength, a steely determination. The pain of Richard's betrayal, the anger at Jason and Tiffany's treachery, had forged a resilience that nothing could break. She understood that revenge, while tempting, would be a hollow victory. True triumph lay in building a life that was independent, self-sufficient, and impervious to the machinations of her enemies. Emily began to lay the groundwork for a new business venture, drawing upon her expertise in pharmaceuticals and her newfound understanding of the digital marketplace. She identified a niche market, a gap in the industry that could be exploited. She started small, working from her cramped apartment, her laptop her only tool. She leveraged her coding skills to build a website, her marketing expertise to attract customers. She worked tirelessly, fueled by a relentless drive to succeed. The initial response was slow, but steady. Emily's unwavering dedication and the high quality of her products soon began to attract attention. Word of mouth spread, and her customer base grew exponentially. As her business flourished, Emily's confidence blossomed. She moved from her cramped apartment to a small office, hiring a small team of dedicated employees. She reinvested her profits, expanding her product line, and exploring new markets. Her past experiences with her ex-husband's company gave her insight into how to manage a successful business. She focused on ethical and sustainable practices, cultivating a reputation for integrity and transparency. Emily proved herself to be a powerful and intelligent business owner. Emily's resilience, her unwavering determination, her ability to transform adversity into triumph, became her defining characteristics. She was no longer a victim, but a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the indomitable spirit of human endurance. The fluorescent lights of her makeshift office, a converted storeroom in a nondescript building, buzzed with an unrelenting energy that mirrored Emily's own. Gone were the plush carpets and mahogany desks of her former life, replaced by the stark utilitarianism of her new reality. Yet, within these humble walls, Emily was crafting something far more valuable than the material possessions she had lost. She was crafting her destiny. Her pharmaceutical company, Phoenix Biologics, was born from the ashes of betrayal, a testament to her unwavering resilience. It was a risky venture, a David against the Goliath of established industry giants. But Emily possessed a unique advantage, an intimate knowledge of the pharmaceutical landscape, gleaned from her years within its upper echelons, but now enhanced with a ruthless drive born from personal vengeance. The initial days were a relentless grind. Emily worked 18-hour shifts, juggling the roles of CEO, researcher, marketer, and even janitor. Her resources were limited, her connections severed, but her determination burned like an unquenchable flame. She focused on a niche market, personalized medication for rare diseases, a field often neglected by large pharmaceutical companies due to its lower profitability. Emily, however, saw not just a business opportunity but a chance to make a tangible difference, to provide hope to those who had been marginalized by the industry's focus on blockbuster drugs. Her lab was a converted garage, her equipment cobbled together from salvaged parts and borrowed resources. She relied on her ingenuity and her meticulous attention to detail, her scientific expertise honed from years observing the best in the field. The first breakthrough came after months of relentless experimentation, a novel drug delivery system that dramatically increased the efficacy of existing medications for a rare genetic disorder. The results were astounding, a testament to Emily's innovative approach. The real struggle, however, was gaining the trust of a skeptical medical community. She was a pariah, her reputation tarnished by the whispers of scandal. Many doctors and researchers, wary of associating with her, dismissed her findings, branding her as an amateur, an interloper. Emily refused to be deterred. She understood that credibility wasn't gifted, it was earned. She started small, partnering with independent clinics and support groups, offering her medication at cost, focusing on patient outcomes, and meticulously documenting her results. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The efficacy of her medication, the tangible improvements in patient lives, spoke louder than any slander. The medical community, initially dismissive, began to take notice. Emily's commitment to ethical practices, a stark contrast to the cutthroat tactics of her former life, also earned her respect. She refused to compromise on quality, to cut corners for profit. She was building a company that was not just successful but also responsible, a beacon of integrity in an often unscrupulous industry. The financial hurdles were immense. Emily navigated the complex world of venture capital, pitching her vision to skeptical investors, her passion and her meticulous data often being her strongest tools. She learned the art of negotiation, of persuasion, of projecting an unshakable confidence even when she was plagued by doubt. She assembled a small team of brilliant but unconventional scientists, drawn to her vision and her unwavering commitment. They were a diverse group, united by their shared passion for innovation and their disdain for the industry's status quo. The long hours began to take their toll. Emily's personal life dwindled to nothing, her apartment becoming an extension of her lab. Sleep was a luxury, meals were often skipped, but the fire in her eyes never dimmed. The breakthrough drug wasn't the last either. They made strides with prosthetics, with medical hardware, and with experimental surgical systems. Emily knew what the public needed, and after years of silence, the public trusted her to make it right. Word of Phoenix Biologics' successes began to spread. The company's reputation for innovation and ethical practices preceded it, attracting top talent and generating significant media attention. Emily, once ostracized, became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. The industry giants, once dismissive, now viewed her with wary respect. They recognized her as a formidable competitor, a force to be reckoned with. But Emily was no longer concerned with petty rivalries. Her focus remained on her patients, on her mission to revolutionize healthcare. Her journey had transformed her, forging her into a leader of unwavering integrity and formidable strength. She had rebuilt her life, not just her business, from the ashes of betrayal, and in doing so, had redefined the very essence of success. 6 years had etched a stark dichotomy into the fabric of their lives, a contrast as sharp as the cut of a diamond against coal. While Richard and Tiffany inhabited a world of conspicuous consumption and superficial glamour, Emily had risen from the ashes, an embodiment of resilience and quiet power. Richard and Tiffany's world was a spectacle, a carefully curated display of wealth and status. Their lives unfolded within the gilded cage of Sterling Manor, its grand halls echoing with the empty cadence of social gatherings and business dealings. Tiffany, the epitome of a trophy wife, graced high society events, her laughter as brittle as the champagne flutes she held. Richard, ever the magnate, commanded boardrooms and negotiated deals, his ego inflated by the sycophantic praise of his entourage. Their lifestyle was a grotesque parody of their former life with Emily. Sterling Manor, once a haven of warmth and genuine affection, had transformed into a sterile monument to their vanity. Their social circles were a revolving door of shallow acquaintances, their conversations as empty as the champagne flutes they constantly refilled. The genuine connections, the shared dreams, the laughter that had once filled their home, were replaced by a hollow echo of their former selves. They were trapped in a cycle of extravagant spending, their lives a never-ending pursuit of material validation. Richard, haunted by the specter of his past mistakes, sought to erase the memories with ever grander displays of wealth. Tiffany, ever the opportunist, reveled in her newfound status, her insecurities masked by a veneer of haughty arrogance. Their marriage, a business arrangement masquerading as a love story, was as brittle as the crystal chandeliers that illuminated their lavish parties. There was no warmth, no intimacy, only a cold calculation, a mutual dependence on the facade they had constructed. Emily, on the other hand, had built her empire on the bedrock of integrity and innovation. Phoenix Biologics, her pharmaceutical company, was a testament to her vision and her unwavering commitment to ethical practices. It was a beacon of hope in a cutthroat industry, a symbol of her triumph over adversity. Her success wasn't measured in the size of her bank account or the extravagance of her lifestyle. It was measured in the lives she had transformed, the groundbreaking treatments she had developed, the trust she had earned from a once skeptical medical community. Her office, a minimalist space of clean lines and natural light, reflected her no-nonsense approach to business. There were no superfluous luxuries, no gaudy displays of wealth, only the quiet hum of innovation, the focused energy of a team driven by purpose. Her employees, a diverse group of brilliant minds, were fiercely loyal, drawn to her vision and her unwavering integrity. They were a family, bound by a shared passion for making a difference, for challenging the status quo. Emily's presence was a force to be reckoned with. Her intelligence was razor sharp, her determination unwavering, her charisma magnetic. She commanded respect, not through intimidation or manipulation, but through her sheer brilliance and her unwavering commitment to her values. She had become a symbol, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. Her story resonated with people, inspiring them to challenge their own limitations, to rise above their own circumstances. The contrast between their lives was stark, a vivid illustration of the choices they had made, the paths they had chosen. Richard and Tiffany, trapped in their gilded cage, were prisoners of their own vanity, their lives as empty as their laughter. Emily, liberated from the shackles of her past, had built a life of purpose and integrity, a testament to her resilience and her unwavering spirit. The opulent grounds of Sterling Manor buzzed with a manufactured gaiety, the air thick with the forced joviality of a high society wedding. Richard and Tiffany, their faces masks of strained smiles, stood beneath a floral arch that seemed to mock the hollowness of their union. The guests, a sea of designer dresses and tailored suits, sipped champagne and exchanged empty pleasantries, their eyes occasionally darting towards the bride and groom, gauging the palpable tension that crackled between them. The day, meticulously planned and lavishly executed, was intended to be a celebration of their triumph, a public affirmation of their control. But beneath the surface of the carefully orchestrated spectacle, a sense of unease simmered, a subtle awareness that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. The atmosphere shifted abruptly with the unmistakable whir of helicopter blades, growing louder, more insistent. The drone sliced through the polite chatter, drawing every gaze upwards. A sleek, black helicopter descended from the clear blue sky, kicking up a whirlwind of dust and scattering the impeccably arranged floral decorations. The dramatic entrance silenced the crowd, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The helicopter landed with a resounding thud, its rotors still spinning, creating a vortex of tension. From its gleaming belly emerged a figure that commanded attention, a woman whose presence exuded an aura of quiet power. Emily. She stepped onto the manicured lawn, her tailored crimson dress a stark contrast to the bridal white and pastel hues that surrounded her. Her posture was erect, her gaze unwavering, her expression a mask of cool determination. The twins, a boy and a girl, their blonde hair and piercing blue eyes identical, held her hands, their presence a silent indictment of Richard's betrayal. The crowd gasped, their whispered exclamations a chorus of shock and morbid curiosity. Richard and Tiffany, their faces drained of color, stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. The carefully constructed facade of their happiness had shattered, revealing the raw fear beneath. Emily moved with a deliberate slowness, each step a declaration of her resurgence. The twins, their expressions mirroring their mother's composure, walked beside her like loyal sentinels. The helicopter, its rotors still spinning, acted as a dramatic backdrop to her entrance, framing her in a halo of defiance. Tiffany, her face now a mask of incredulous rage, took a step forward. Emily. What are you doing here? Emily's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. Attending a wedding. Her voice, though soft, carried across the stunned silence like a clarion call. A very significant wedding. Richard, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, guilt, and a dawning realization of the situation's gravity, found his voice. Emily, this is inappropriate. You can't just show up here like this. Inappropriate. Emily echoed, her smile fading. Inappropriate is a rather mild term for what you did, Richard. 6 years ago. But then, you've always had a talent for understatement. The twins, their eyes fixed on their father, remained silent, their presence a tangible manifestation of Richard's betrayal and Emily's resilience. They were the living, breathing testament to the life he had so callously discarded. The tension in the air thickened, each unspoken word hanging heavy like a storm cloud about to burst. The carefully orchestrated facade of the wedding, the illusion of happiness and celebration, was shattered. The ghosts of the past, long buried, had risen, demanding their due. Emily's return was not merely a dramatic entrance, it was a declaration of war. She was there to expose their lies, to dismantle their facade, to reclaim her life and her legacy. And she would not be denied. The grand spectacle of Richard and Tiffany's wedding, intended as a testament to their union, was abruptly hijacked by the arrival of Emily, a figure both familiar and foreign, accompanied by the undeniable echoes of Richard's past, the twins. Their presence was a living, breathing accusation, a stark reminder of the life Richard had callously discarded in his pursuit of wealth and power. They were not merely children, but tangible embodiments of his betrayal, their very existence a challenge to the carefully constructed facade he had erected. The twins, a boy and a girl, stood beside Emily like miniature sentinels, their blonde hair and piercing blue eyes identical, mirroring the striking features of their mother. Their expressions were composed, their gazes unwavering, their silence more powerful than any accusation. They were a living testament to Emily's resilience, her ability to build a life from the ashes of betrayal. Their presence at the wedding was not a mere coincidence, but a deliberate act, a reclaiming of their narrative, a declaration of their right to exist in the world Richard had tried to deny them. For Richard, the sight of his children was a jolt, a jarring reminder of the life he had abandoned. The guilt, long buried beneath layers of denial and rationalization, resurfaced with a vengeance, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed walls of his self-deception. He looked at them, searching for a semblance of himself, a reflection of the man he used to be. But all he saw were their eyes, cold and accusing, mirroring the disdain that had begun to simmer in the eyes of his guests. Tiffany, her face contorted in a mask of rage and fear, saw the twins as a threat, a tangible manifestation of the past she had desperately tried to bury. They were a reminder of the woman she had usurped, the life she had stolen. The twins' presence had a profound impact on everyone present. For the guests, their whispers and murmurs turned from polite congratulations to shocked speculations. They were a scandalous spectacle that brought the secrets out to the open. Emily, standing tall and resolute, watched the reactions with a quiet satisfaction. The twins were her weapons, her silent soldiers, their presence a potent reminder of Richard's duplicity. Their existence also showcased Emily's incredible ability to persevere. Emily wasn't just there to make a scene. She was there to show everyone that not only did she survive, she thrived, and these were the testaments. The perfect little children who were taken and hidden away, were living proof that Richard had made a mistake, and Emily had made a success. The twins were a testament to her strength, her refusal to be broken. They were a physical manifestation of her ability to create something beautiful, something powerful, from the depths of betrayal. Their presence, a stark contrast to the hollow opulence of the wedding, was a reminder that true wealth wasn't measured in material possessions, but in the strength of character, the resilience of the human spirit. They were a living echo of Richard's past, a constant reminder of his betrayal, and a powerful symbol of Emily's triumph over adversity. They had become not just children, but symbols in a much larger story. Emily's return to Stirling Manor was not just a dramatic entrance, it was a dazzling display of her newfound power, a visual testament to the success she had carved from the ashes of betrayal. She exuded an aura of quiet confidence, a serene power that commanded attention without uttering a word. Her beauty had matured, deepened, and intensified. The youthful innocence that Richard had once found so endearing had been replaced by a captivating blend of strength and grace. Her eyes, once soft and trusting, now held a steely glint, a spark of unwavering determination. Her features, sculpted by years of resilience and hard-won victories, possessed a timeless elegance, a quiet radiance that spoke of inner peace and hard-earned confidence. Her attire was a study in understated elegance. The crimson dress, tailored to perfection, moved with her like liquid fire, its simplicity amplifying her innate grace. It was a statement of power, a bold declaration of her independence, a stark contrast to the bridal white of Tiffany's contrived innocence. Her wealth was not ostentatious, not a vulgar display of material possessions, but a quiet manifestation of her achievements. Phoenix Biologics, her pharmaceutical empire, was a testament to her vision, her ingenuity, her unwavering commitment to ethical practices. It was a beacon of innovation, a symbol of her transformative power. Her presence filled the room, not with the brash arrogance of the nouveau riche, but with the quiet confidence of a self-made woman. She moved with an effortless grace, her every gesture exuding an aura of controlled power, a quiet assurance that commanded respect. Her success was not confined to her business ventures. She had cultivated a network of loyal allies, of brilliant minds drawn to her vision, her integrity, her unwavering commitment to making a difference. She had become a symbol of empowerment, an inspiration to those who dared to challenge the status quo. Her demeanor was a study in contrasts, a blend of quiet strength and disarming charm. She possessed a razor-sharp intellect, a keen understanding of the world she inhabited, but she wielded her knowledge with grace and humility. Her laughter, once a melodic chime, now possessed a resonant quality, a deep undertone of hard-won wisdom. Her words, once soft and hesitant, now carried the weight of conviction, the quiet assurance of a woman who had faced adversity and emerged victorious. The twins, her children, stood beside her like miniature sentinels, their blonde hair and piercing blue eyes mirroring her own. They were a testament to her resilience, a living embodiment of her ability to create something beautiful, something powerful, from the depths of betrayal. They were a reflection of her inner strength, her unwavering commitment to her family, her refusal to be defined by the actions of others. They were a part of her success, and they amplified it. Emily's presence at the wedding was a stark reminder of what Richard had lost, a tangible manifestation of the woman he had underestimated, the life he had discarded. She was a beacon of success, a living testament to the power of resilience, a radiant symbol of triumph over adversity. The opulent facade of Richard and Tiffany's wedding, once a symbol of their triumph, now became a stage for their unmasking. Emily, standing tall and resolute, her gaze unwavering, held the gathered crowd in a tense silence. The twins, their presence a silent accusation, stood beside her, their expressions mirroring her own. "I believe it's time for a few truths to be revealed," Emily declared, her voice resonating with a quiet authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. "Truths that have been buried for far too long." Her eyes, sharp and accusatory, locked onto Jason and Tiffany, their faces now masks of thinly veiled fear. "You two," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "have woven a web of lies and deceit, seeking to destroy me, to steal my life, to seize control of everything I hold dear." Jason, attempting to maintain his composure, scoffed. "Emily, this is absurd. You're delusional. This is a wedding, not a courtroom." "Oh, but it is a courtroom," Emily retorted, her eyes flashing with anger. "A courtroom of public opinion, where the evidence speaks for itself." She gestured towards a large screen that had been discreetly set up near the floral arch. With a click of a remote, the screen flickered to life, displaying a series of incriminating documents and photographs. "These," Emily announced, her voice filled with righteous anger, "are the fabricated evidence you used to frame me, to paint me as an adulteress, to turn Richard against me." The screen displayed grainy images of Emily in intimate settings with a man she barely recognized, emails filled with fabricated conversations, and bank statements showing suspicious transactions. Each piece of evidence, meticulously crafted, exposed the depth of their treachery. "These lies," Emily continued, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage, "were designed to destroy my reputation, to steal my children, to leave me destitute and alone." Tiffany, her face contorted in a mask of fury, lunged towards Emily, her voice a venomous hiss. "You bitch! You're trying to ruin everything. Emily stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. Everything you stole from me, she countered, her voice laced with steel. Everything you tried to destroy. The confrontation escalated, the carefully constructed facade of their composure crumbling, revealing the raw malice beneath. Jason, his charm evaporated, resorted to threats and intimidation, his voice a guttural growl. You have no proof, he snarled, his eyes filled with a desperate rage. These are just allegations. Oh, but I have proof, Emily replied, her lips curving into a predatory smile. Proof that you and Tiffany orchestrated a series of fraudulent business transactions, embezzling millions from Richard's company, seeking to bankrupt him, to seize control of his empire. The screen displayed a series of financial documents, meticulously tracing the flow of illicit funds, exposing the intricate web of deceit they had woven. The crowd gasped, their whispered exclamations a chorus of shock and disbelief. Richard, his face ashen, stared at the screen, the realization of their treachery dawning on him. The world he had inhabited, the life he had built, crumbled before his eyes. You betrayed me, he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and anguish. All these years, you were stealing from me, manipulating me, destroying my life. Tiffany, her eyes filled with a desperate fury, tried to defend herself, to salvage what was left of her carefully constructed facade. But her words fell on deaf ears, her pleas drowned out by the chorus of condemnation. Emily, standing tall and resolute, watched their downfall with a quiet satisfaction. Justice, long denied, was finally being served. The carefully constructed web of lies and deceit had been exposed, their treachery laid bare for all to see. The truth, like a blinding light, illuminated the darkness they had sought to conceal. The wedding, once a spectacle of forced joy and calculated alliances, transformed into a theater of accusation and collapse. The air crackled with raw emotion, every gaze fixed on the digital screen displaying the irrefutable evidence of Jason and Tiffany's treachery. Emily, a figure of icy composure, guided the unfolding revelation with the precision of a prosecutor. Let's start with the financials, she began, her voice resonating with cold authority. Exhibit A, the consulting fees you both siphoned from Sterling Enterprises. Each one a meticulously crafted illusion, a paper trail leading directly to your offshore accounts. The screen displayed a series of transactions, each one highlighted with damning clarity. Numbers scrolled, dates flashed, and digital signatures confirmed the scale of their embezzlement. Richard, his face a mask of shock and betrayal, stared at the evidence, his empire, his life's work, now tainted with the grime of their greed. Exhibit B, Emily continued, her voice gaining momentum, the research data you falsified, the clinical trials you manipulated. All for a quick profit, regardless of the potential harm to patients. Your actions endangered lives, betrayed trust, and defiled the very essence of scientific integrity. Medical reports, lab results, and patient testimonies filled the screen, their revelations growing more harrowing with each passing moment. A collective gasp rippled through the stunned audience. The supposed model siblings were poisoning the well of medicine for money. And finally, Emily said, pausing for dramatic effect, the campaign of slander, the orchestrated smear campaign designed to destroy my reputation, to steal my children. Exhibit C, the forged documents, the fabricated emails, the carefully constructed lies that nearly shattered my life. The screen now displayed emails and documents with the falsified nature clearly displayed, and audio recordings of conversations that showed the scheming clearly. Their words were now presented as their worst enemy. The air thrummed with the weight of exposed treachery. Jason, his veneer of charm utterly shattered, resorted to bluster and threats. This is a setup, he bellowed, his voice laced with desperation. She's trying to frame us. None of this is real. Tiffany, her icy composure melted into a mask of snarling rage, echoed his denials. She's lying. All of it? She's always been jealous of us, trying to sabotage everything we do. But their words rang hollow, their protestations drowned out by the chorus of condemnation from the stunned onlookers. The evidence, stark and irrefutable, painted a damning picture of their greed, their treachery, their utter lack of remorse. The twins, their presence a silent indictment, stood beside Emily, their gazes unwavering. They saw the faces of the people who attempted to destroy their mother, and did not forgive. "Your facade is crumbling," Emily said, her voice laced with triumph. "Your lies are exposed. The world now sees you for who you truly are, manipulators, thieves, and betrayers." The sudden clang of police sirens pierced through the tension, their wail growing louder as they approached the manor. Detectives emerged, their expressions grim, their eyes fixed on Jason and Tiffany. The carefully orchestrated charade was over. "Jason Miller, Tiffany Miller," one of the detectives declared, his voice authoritative. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." The siblings, their faces twisted in a grotesque parody of their former selves, were led away in handcuffs, their reign of deception ending in a public spectacle of humiliation. Their carefully constructed world, their elaborate facade, had collapsed, leaving behind only the wreckage of their ambition. The grand ballroom, once a stage for opulent celebration, now became a theater of Richard's unraveling. As the evidence mounted, each damning revelation chipping away at his carefully constructed illusions, a profound shift occurred within him. The confident, self-assured magnate began to crumble, replaced by a man consumed by remorse and disbelief. He stared at the screen, his gaze fixed on the financial documents that detailed the extent of Jason and Tiffany's treachery. The numbers swam before his eyes, a stark testament to the years of betrayal, the calculated theft of his life's work. The magnitude of their deception was staggering, their greed a gaping wound in his trust. The medical reports, the patient testimonies, the evidence of manipulated clinical trials, these were not just financial transgressions, they were betrayals of trust, acts of calculated cruelty that struck at the core of his humanity. He had unwittingly been complicit in their schemes, his blind trust a weapon they had wielded against the very people he sought to serve. The final blow came with the exposure of the fabricated evidence against Emily. The forged documents, the manipulated images, the carefully constructed lies, they painted a picture of calculated malice, a deliberate attempt to destroy the woman he had once loved. He watched the replay of Emily's fabricated encounters with a stranger, each frame a burning indictment of his own blind gullibility. He heard the echoes of his own accusatory words, the bitter pronouncements of betrayal, the cold dismissal of her pleas for understanding. A wave of nausea washed over him, the reality of his actions sinking in with the force of a physical blow. He had not just been deceived, he had been a willing participant in her destruction, a pawn in their elaborate game of deceit. The guilt was a crushing weight, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He had not just betrayed Emily, he had betrayed himself, his own integrity, his own sense of right and wrong. He looked at Emily, her face etched with a quiet resolve, her eyes reflecting the pain he had inflicted. He saw not the woman he had accused, but the woman he had wronged, the woman he had nearly destroyed. The twins, their faces mirroring Emily's composure, their gazes fixed on him with a chilling intensity, were a constant reminder of his failure, his unforgivable transgression. They were not just children, they were living embodiments of his shame. The realization of his actions, the depth of his betrayal, sent a wave of anguish through him. He had not just lost Emily, he had lost himself, his own sense of honor, his own moral compass. He stumbled, his body heavy with the weight of his remorse, his mind reeling from the magnitude of his mistakes. The world around him, once a symbol of his triumph, now seemed a grotesque mockery, a testament to his folly. He had built an empire on lies, surrounded himself with deceit, and sacrificed love for power. The emptiness of his victory, the hollowness of his achievements, now stood starkly revealed. He was a broken man, stripped of his pride, his arrogance replaced by a gnawing emptiness. The carefully constructed edifice of his life had crumbled, leaving behind only the wreckage of his remorse. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the occasional gasp or murmur from the stunned onlookers. Richard, his gaze fixed on Emily, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for forgiveness, found himself unable to speak. The words caught in his throat, choked by the weight of his regret. He had lost her trust, her respect, her love. He had lost everything that truly mattered. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he could never win it back. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. Emily, standing at the makeshift command center of her digital evidence, was the conductor of this devastating symphony, each revelation a precisely timed note of destruction against Jason and Tiffany's carefully constructed illusions. "Let's begin with the digital audit," Emily announced, her voice calm but resonant, a detailed forensic analysis of the company servers, and the personal devices belonging to Jason and Tiffany. Prepared by an independent cybersecurity firm, untouched by their influence. A digital projection filled a large portion of one wall, a timeline of data transfers, altered financial records, and surreptitious communication logs. Each entry was highlighted with timestamps, IP addresses, and source codes, revealing a sophisticated network of illicit transactions. "Observe the transaction logs," Emily instructed, highlighting a series of transfers routed through seemingly innocuous accounts. These accounts, registered under shell corporations, were the conduits for their embezzled funds. Each transaction, meticulously recorded here, can be traced back to, a pause for dramatic effect, their personal offshore accounts. A close-up of bank statements flashed on screen, detailing the precise amounts and dates of deposits, the stark numbers damning in their undeniable clarity. Gasps rippled through the stunned onlookers, their whispers a mixture of disbelief and fascination. "Now, let's examine the medical data," Emily continued, shifting the focus to a series of scientific reports. "These are the manipulated clinical trial results, the altered data that compromised patient safety." Graphs and charts filled the screen, displaying the discrepancies between original findings and the doctored reports. A series of recorded testimonies from former lab technicians and medical professionals detailed the pressure they were under, threats they received, to falsify the data. "The patient testimonials," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger, "tell a different story. Of side effects downplayed, of dangerous interactions concealed, of human lives put at risk for profit." A series of video clips played, testimonials from patients, their voices shaking with pain and anger, detailing the devastating consequences of the manipulated drugs. The emotional impact was palpable, the crowd's reaction shifting from stunned silence to indignant murmurs. "And finally," Emily said, her voice regaining its composure, "the campaign of character assassination. The smear campaign designed to destroy my reputation, to steal my children, to leave me destitute and alone." She displayed a series of emails, meticulously traced to Jason and Tiffany's accounts, filled with slanderous accusations and fabricated evidence. She played audio recordings of conversations, their voices laced with malice and deceit, detailing their elaborate schemes. The crowd's reaction was a kaleidoscope of emotions. Gasps of shock, murmurs of disbelief, and whispers of indignation filled the ballroom. Richard, his face ashen, stared at the unfolding evidence, the reality of their treachery sinking in like a physical blow. Several of Richard's closest business associates exchanged shocked glances, their expressions betraying a dawning realization of the extent of the betrayal. Others, socialites and celebrities, recoiled in disgust, their carefully constructed world of appearances shattering before their eyes. Even the staff of Sterling Manor, people who had served Richard for years, and looked up to Tiffany and Jason, looked at the pair with disgust and hate. As Emily presented her evidence, she wasn't just exposing crimes, she was dismantling their carefully crafted image. Each revelation chipped away at their facade, revealing the callous manipulators beneath. Tiffany, who once held herself with icy composure, now shrunk under the weight of the accusations. Jason, his charming veneer gone, resorted to desperate denials and bluster, his voice a frantic attempt to salvage his crumbling image. But their words were futile, drowned out by the tide of evidence and the chorus of condemnation from the stunned onlookers. The logic of Emily's presentation, the stark clarity of the evidence, and the raw emotion of the situation combined to create a spectacle of dramatic unraveling. The echoes of the explosive revelations still reverberated through the grand ballroom, the aftershocks of Jason and Tiffany's downfall leaving a gaping void in Richard's carefully constructed world. He stood amidst the wreckage, a broken figure consumed by the magnitude of his betrayal. The confident magnate, the self-assured husband, had vanished, replaced by a man ravaged by guilt and regret. His gaze was fixed on Emily, her composure a stark contrast to his own unraveling. He saw not the woman he had wronged, but the woman he had nearly destroyed. Her strength, her resilience, her unwavering integrity, were a testament to his failure, a constant reminder of the depth of his betrayal. The twins, their presence a silent accusation, intensified his anguish. They were not just children, they were living embodiments of his shame, their innocent eyes reflecting the depth of his transgression. He yearned to reach out to them, to bridge the chasm his actions had created, but the weight of his guilt held him captive. The memories of their shared life, once a source of joy and comfort, now morphed into agonizing reminders of his betrayal. He recalled their laughter, their whispered confidences, the dreams they had built together, now tainted by the knowledge of his complicity in their destruction. He replayed their conversations, searching for clues, for hints of the deception that had unfolded around him, but found only a blank wall of incomprehension. He had been blinded by his trust, deafened by their lies, a willing pawn in their elaborate game of deceit. The guilt gnawed at him, a relentless tormentor that offered no respite. He had not just lost Emily, he had lost himself, his own sense of honor, his own moral compass. The emptiness of his victory, the hollowness of his achievements, now stood starkly revealed. He yearned for forgiveness, for a chance to atone for his sins, but he knew that words were futile, that apologies were meaningless in the face of his unforgivable transgressions. He had shattered their trust, broken their hearts, and stolen their innocence. The desire to make amends, to rebuild the bridges he had burned, was a burning ache within him. He longed to hold his children, to feel their warmth against his skin, to erase the pain he had inflicted. But he knew that his touch was tainted, his embrace a reminder of his betrayal. He grappled with the enormity of his actions, the consequences of his blind trust, the devastation he had wrought. He had allowed greed and ambition to corrupt his judgment, to transform him into a man he no longer recognized. The carefully constructed walls of his self-deception had crumbled, revealing the raw ugliness of his actions. He was left standing amidst the wreckage, a broken man consumed by remorse, yearning for a redemption he didn't deserve. His internal struggle was a tempest, a raging battle between guilt and regret, between despair and a desperate desire for redemption. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, his heart aching for a forgiveness he feared he could never earn. The grand ballroom, once a stage for opulent celebration and then a courtroom of revelation, was now a somber tableau of shattered illusions. Richard, standing amidst the emotional wreckage, faced the daunting task of mending the fractured bonds with his children, a task that loomed like an insurmountable mountain. The twins, their faces etched with a wary reserve, regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. They were not the innocent children he remembered, but young individuals who had witnessed the unraveling of their father's carefully constructed world. They had seen his betrayal, his complicity in their mother's pain, and the stark reality of his compromised integrity. Richard's initial attempts at interaction were met with a wall of polite indifference. They listened to his hesitant apologies, his clumsy attempts at explanation, with a detached politeness that stung more than any angry outburst. Their eyes held a silent question: how could you? He tried to engage them in activities they once enjoyed, to bridge the gap with shared memories and laughter. But the laughter was strained, the memories tainted by the shadow of his betrayal. They were polite companions, not loving children. The twins' loyalty was firmly anchored to Emily, their bond strengthened by shared adversity. They viewed Richard as an outsider, an interloper in their tight-knit world. Their unwavering support for their mother, their silent accusation, amplified his guilt and deepened his despair. Richard faced the daunting challenge of earning their trust, a task that required patience, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to honesty. He learned to listen more than he spoke, to validate their feelings, to acknowledge his mistakes without resorting to excuses. He spent countless hours with them, engaging in their hobbies, attending their school events, and simply being present in their lives. He learned to respect their boundaries, to understand their reticence, to appreciate their guarded affection. The process was slow, frustrating, and often heartbreaking. There were moments of fleeting connection, glimpses of the warmth they once shared, but they were often followed by periods of icy detachment, reminders of the damage he had inflicted. Richard found himself grappling with a profound sense of inadequacy. He was no longer the confident father, the guiding force in their lives, but a supplicant, a petitioner seeking their approval. He was learning to be a father again, from the ground up, with no guarantee of success. He sought guidance from therapists and counselors, determined to understand the impact of his actions on his children, to learn how to repair the damage he had caused. He read books, attended workshops, and immersed himself in the world of child psychology, desperate to find a way to connect with his children. Emily's role was complex. While she didn't actively sabotage his attempts at reconciliation, she also didn't pave the way for him. She allowed the children to make their own choices, to set their own pace, to determine the level of their involvement with their father. She was their protector, their advocate, their guiding force. Richard learned to respect Emily's decisions, to accept her boundaries, to understand her need for control. He recognized that his attempts at reconciliation were not just about him and his children, they were about rebuilding the trust he had shattered, a trust that Emily had earned through years of unwavering devotion. He understood that his path to redemption was a long and arduous one, fraught with challenges and setbacks. He had to prove his sincerity, not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with consistent actions, with unwavering commitment, with genuine remorse. The sterile silence of the aftermath hung heavy in the ballroom, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of revelations. Richard, his frame slumped and his spirit broken, approached Emily with the tentative steps of a penitent. His eyes, once brimming with arrogance, now held a raw vulnerability, a desperate plea for understanding. "Emily," he began, his voice a hoarse whisper, I don't know what to say. Words seem so inadequate." Emily, her expression a mask of guarded composure, regarded him with a mixture of pity and skepticism. The years of betrayal, the pain he had inflicted, had left deep scars, wounds that time alone could not heal. "Say the truth, Richard," she replied, her voice steady but devoid of warmth. "Tell me why you betrayed me, why you chose to believe their lies over my loyalty." Richard's gaze dropped to the floor, his shoulders slumping further. "I was blind, Emily," he confessed, his voice thick with remorse. "Blinded by their charm, their flattery, their calculated manipulation. They preyed on my insecurities, my ambition, my desire for control." He paused, his voice trembling with emotion. "I allowed them to poison my mind, to turn me against you, the woman I loved, the mother of my children. I was a fool, a puppet dancing to their tune." Emily's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of empathy breaking through her icy exterior. "You were weak, Richard," she corrected, her voice laced with a quiet sadness. "You chose to believe the lies that validated your ego, that fed your ambition." A tense silence filled the room, the weight of their unspoken history hanging heavy in the air. The years of betrayal, the pain of his actions, had created a chasm between them, a gulf that seemed impossible to bridge. "Can you ever forgive me, Emily?" Richard asked, his voice raw with desperation. "Can we ever rebuild what we lost?" Emily's lips curved into a sad smile. "Forgiveness is a journey, Richard," she replied, her voice laced with weariness. "Not a destination. It's a process of healing, of rebuilding trust, of proving that you've changed." She paused, her gaze shifting to the twins, who stood nearby, their expressions mirroring her own cautious reserve. "And trust, Richard, is earned, not given. Especially when there are children involved." The road to reconciliation was fraught with challenges, a delicate dance of forgiveness and trust. Richard, stripped of his arrogance, approached Emily with humility and sincerity. He listened to her pain, acknowledged his mistakes, and sought to understand the depth of her wounds. He didn't make excuses, didn't attempt to minimize his actions. He simply owned his mistakes, accepted the consequences, and vowed to change. He tried to show with his actions, not with words, that he was trying to be better. Emily, despite her guarded demeanor, recognized his genuine remorse. She saw the change in him, the quiet humility, the unwavering commitment to repairing the damage he had caused. But forgiveness didn't come easily. The scars of betrayal ran deep, the wounds of his actions were slow to heal. They navigated a delicate balance, their interactions marked by a cautious respect, a fragile hope for reconciliation. Their children, however, were another story. Time would pass, and their hearts would eventually mend. The sterile silence of the ballroom, once a battleground of exposed truths and broken alliances, began to soften, replaced by a tentative warmth. Richard and Emily, two souls scarred by betrayal, stood on the precipice of a new beginning. Their journey towards reconciliation was not a swift or seamless process, it was a slow, deliberate dance of forgiveness and trust, a delicate rebuilding of shattered foundations. Richard's transformation was profound. The arrogant magnate, the blinded husband, had shed his former skin, revealing a man humbled by remorse and driven by a desperate desire for redemption. He had embraced humility, learned to listen, to empathize, to understand the depth of his transgressions. His relationship with the twins, initially marked by icy reserve, slowly thawed. He earned their trust, not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with consistent actions, with unwavering commitment, with genuine affection. He became a constant presence in their lives, a pillar of support, a father they could finally rely on. Emily, though initially guarded, recognized the sincerity of his change. She saw the quiet humility in his eyes, the genuine remorse in his actions. She understood that forgiveness was not about absolving his sins, but about allowing herself to heal, to move forward. The scars of betrayal remained, a constant reminder of the pain they had endured, but they no longer defined their lives. They had learned to navigate the delicate balance of forgiveness and trust, to build a new foundation of respect and understanding. Their home, once a symbol of their fractured union, transformed into a haven of warmth and authenticity. The sterile opulence was replaced by a cozy intimacy, the echoing silence by the laughter of children, the tense atmosphere by an unspoken understanding. They learned to communicate, to share their vulnerabilities, to build a partnership based on honesty and mutual respect. They discovered a love that was deeper, stronger, and more resilient than the one they had lost. The twins, once caught in the crossfire of their parents' conflict, flourished in the newfound harmony. They blossomed into confident, compassionate individuals, their resilience a testament to their parents' journey of healing. Their home became a sanctuary, a haven of love and acceptance, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. They had weathered the storm of betrayal, survived the crucible of pain, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The ending was not a fairy tale conclusion, with all wounds magically healed and all wrongs instantly righted. Instead, it was a quiet triumph, a testament to the hard-won victory of forgiveness, a celebration of the enduring power of love to rebuild shattered lives? They would never be the people they were before. They were wiser, sadder, and stronger,